Asia-Pacific, and if you want to look at it that way, the best player that we had this season, given that he finished first in a whirlwind last couple of weeks for posesi.
Very impressive stuff indeed. He will be the one on the rogue in this matchup. Glory with the double Illidari studies and the coin definitely feels like he's already got a bit of an advantage, but I expect a full mull from posesi and things could turn around with early Octobot or something like that. Oh, or this curve.
Okay, when you're on the play and not the coin, this is about as good as it gets. Even just Tempo Foxy is something that I would heavily look at with this hand as well.
Yeah, definitely just screams out for a curve. But for Glory, only game plan now is looking for Skull, Skull, Skull.
Okay, going with the philosophy does make sense. There's always a consideration for Kurtrus because Kurtrus is probably the best outcast card to play when you don't outcast it, because it still just does a decent job at clearing up some rogue minions. But philosophy is in your deck. It's a key part of the game plan, so it does still make a lot of sense.
He does go with the Tempo Foxy like you were talking about, which can look a little bit weird because he has field contact in hand, but it's important to note that on 2 mana, it's actually not the easiest proposition for Demon Hunter to deal with this. Even if they do have to, like, say, Chaos Strike, they take that damage, which is what you were playing the Tempo Foxy for in the beginning. And if they have to use coin to Eldrazi Warblades, that's potentially Skull 1 turn later. It's all these cascading little effects that build up in the matchup.
Pretty interesting situation here where Glory goes for the Sigil Runner but doesn't play it, which I actually like, because even though you'd pick that usually just to throw it down and cycle a card, these cards cost -1 at the moment. There is a double discount on any card, any outcast card. So for the next few turns, if he draws Skull, he can literally just play it from that point and then instantly get the outcast and draw all cards. But whatever he's going to do, he has to do it very, very fast, because posesi's hand has gone from good to better. Man crit consumed by hatred drawn, golems coming down, a very nice field contact turn coming together as well with the Octobot and the Orc Merchant. This is premium.
And he gets some pretty good options off the Golem as well. I'm pretty sure he took Stealth for the first one. The +2/+2 is not unrealistic to get value. He's got the Man-Cricked Enraged. But the other reason why Glory saved the Sigil Runner was it's because if he top decks Skull of Gul'dan, he wants all of those discounts available. He wants the coin available. Man, both these players are drawing for World Championship quality, you have to say.
This is insane! Glory literally just has lethal next turn. Right? Or like really close to it at least.
I think he's still 1 spell damage minion away, but yes, it's a ton of damage.
12-24. Is he 1 mana off lethal next turn just because he can't fit in the hero power?
I think so.
Because the swing deals 4 damage, so he has 28 damage next turn as I count it.
Yeah, with Morg Il'gynoth, with 1 Fell Scream, that's 12, and then the other Fell Scream can go on his own minions. That's another 12, and then the swing is 4.
Oh!
1 mana off, you're absolutely right. Oh. Is he just gonna die because he doesn't have it? No, he can just go for a partial clear, right?
I mean, he's still under some threat. Like, yes, you know, the game does not just end now, but it's kind of scary. You don't want to use a Moog because you're just a turn away from winning the game.
Of course, but he has to, otherwise he's just dead, right?
I guess, yeah.
However, just using 1 Morg and Immolation Aura doesn't actually clear that much. We could see 1 more, 1 Fell Scream Blast Immolation Aura, which he would have the mana to do even after going double jump. But he gets Philosophy now, so he can dump 1 Morg and still have the lethal next turn, but he would... Oh, no, wait. He would have to use Fell Scream to stay alive this turn, right? So...
Yeah.
He doesn't have lethal next turn.
So he goes Immolation Aura, double Moog, Fell Scream Blast, I think is probably the play, but thanks to some very nice positioning from posesi, Glory can't actually clear as much as he might like here.
Yeah. It's all just a little bit messy. The turbo start from posesi, the turn 4 Man-Crick Enraged meant that things just didn't work out cleanly. And I don't know what it is about posesi, but he's just forced his practice partners onto the rope twice in this matchup as the rogue.
And I mean, whatever the play was supposed to be on this turn from Glory, quite obviously, this was not it. If he'd played the Immolation Aura first, he would have been able to at least survive on board. but he just crumpled. He crumbled, whatever the correct word is there. Glory did it, because that from posesi was the most aggressive you can possibly get in that matchup, and it works out beautifully for him. Glory, you'd have to imagine spending the first 15-20 seconds of that turn just checking, double checking, is there any way that you can maneuver lethal? And in the end, the rope just burning that little bit too fast, leaves himself dead on board. And it's not the kind of game that we were expecting to see right out the gate here from Glory, just fumbling the recovery on that turn.
That's why Demon Hunter is so difficult, right? Because you often feel like it's so close that you have to double check that you're not being stupid, but in the end, you sometimes just waste time if you don't get that math in, and then you don't have the time to calculate what's the best way to stay alive and deal with the board, and kind of tripped up because of that. It happened with Alutamu versus posesi. It happened again here as Glory on the OTK Demon Hunter just got bogged down by the best possible opening curve from posesi outside of like one combo card to go with a Foxy Fraud. Everything else went perfectly for posesi. That means he takes the matchup that Monsanto and you call favored, although I don't think that's necessarily the average pan out for the Rogue nor the Demon Hunter.
No, I've done that literally exact pan out 100% of times. That's exactly how it goes, Gia. You just need to get on my Rogue level down in triple digits, legend. But either way, for posesi, taking a win there with the Rogue is a big deal, of course. Kind of expected, I think, at some point. But given that the other decks was Rush Warrior, especially Rush Warrior with Kresh, I think what was a bad matchup for Miracle Rogue goes to a disastrous matchup, given that Kresh gives you all that armor capabilities. So going for the burn plan, which is such a premier part of your plan in Miracle Rogue against Rush Warrior, I think does make this a lot easier for posesi. Going to be going for the Demon Hunter of his own now. And again, if he doesn't line up against the Rogue, I would argue he's got decent matchups. The Rush Warrior, I think, is okay against the Demon Hunter, but not one of those absurdly good matchups that we sometimes see.
I would agree as well. Honestly, I just want to see posesi on the Demon Hunter because he's just foiled so many Demon Hunters, that of his friends to begin with, that I wonder what it'd be like for him to get a taste of his own medicine. But pretty excited to see Glory on the Rush Warrior once again, because he did just take a very quick win against the Control Warlock from Alan last series, where we saw the Crush put in a lot of work. I'm curious to see if the Naralex coming down on curve could have some of the impact that we were theorizing it might have with conditioning onto something like Laughing Sister for a very difficult to remove weapon. And traditionally, just the rest of the deck is still just very standard. I'm honestly a bit surprised to still see double Crab Rider in there. I felt like that card has fallen off quite a bit, especially with the non-Nazoth build, but Glory just favoring 2-ofs of everything you can run 2-of, which is definitely something subtle with respect.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of a funny facet, because when Zerios was streaming the other day, he was saying that he doesn't really want to play Lady Vash in his Shaman deck, but he doesn't want to put in... There's no other legendaries he'd rather play. There are normal minions he'd rather play of a non-legendary rarity, but he can't put in a one-off in his list. It has to be a legendary replacing a legendary, which is very emblematic of the way that a lot of players think. But either way, as you said, pretty much standard list of Rush Warrior, even if it's feels like it's living in the past somewhat with Crab Rider still in there. It can do a lot in some matchups. Against Demon Hunters specifically, though, you just want higher attack minions. These Crab Riders, not quite impactful enough. And so posesi, I think, going to be doing pretty much what Glory tried to do on the other side, but he's going to have more time to do it, importantly. And so we'll be able to go for those combos a little bit more consistently.
I do think if Crab Rider is still in any list, it's not mainly for by itself being a strong body, but because it's a way to follow up a coin parade leader curve with a powerful minion, right? Even if it doesn't have Wind Fury, it goes up to 3 attack, and it has that health stat line where just Eye Beam, just Chaos Strike Hero Power cannot deal with it, and that's going to be relevant in this matchup because we've talked about how 3 health is that sweet spot for Demon Hunter to be able to deal with, to the point that we've seen Glory on Demon Hunter keep Outcast Eye Beam in order to deal with Rush Warrior threats. For posesi, though, I'd expect just the Illidari studies as a keep here. Oh, going for the Warblades too.
Yeah, we've seen that more and more, haven't we, with the Warblades being kept. We've seen, what was it, Glory keeping Raging Fell Screamer as well, just because he saw Alutemu get it overdrawn or something stupid like that. Like, these Japanese players, they play pretty fast and loose with the mulligans sometimes, not necessarily going off of stats. But I think here for posesi, memes aside, the Eldraki Warblades is a decent way to stay ahead on board at the start.
Yeah, Glory did tweet out that he tried keeping the Fell Screamer because he saw Alatem overdraw it. I don't think that's the only reason, obviously. But it is certainly a card that has its merits in matchups where you do expect to, if you lose, it's because you got out-tempoed like turn 8, turn 7 or earlier, and then you need to have the combo online by turn 8. And Raging's Fell Screamer does allow you to do that even if you don't hit the perfect Skull discounts. Speaking of Skull, Posesi has an option to take another one, and I don't think he'll have hand space issues because he's just going turn 3 Warblades into turn 4 Fell Screamer, so it's fine to take the next Skull.
Oh yeah, you're ecstatic with how this works out. If you're Posesi, the only thing you don't want to see is super fast development on the other side, which Parade Leader into Sage Dive admittedly can afford you, or even for that matter into Coin 10 Trasher, because a Demon is going to be undormanting, waking up on the following turn. So at the very least, Glory has a very respectable starting hand that maybe will punish the curve of just Eldraki Fell Screamer Skull.
I grow impatient.
And the Parade Leader is, you know, what's causing Posesi to hesitate this turn, because he obviously has a hand that wants to get the Skull down turn 5, but Parade Leader is one of those threatening minions that makes it such that if it's just Fell Screamer next turn, Glory could be pushing a ton of damage because Posesi won't even have mana to hero power. As it happens, Glory's mulligan is very awkward because he kept the double conditioning, but currently only has 1 minion, I guess 2 with the Stage Dive in hand, but the Naralex potentially could have given another minion. Dream is one of the worst outcomes though.
Was that really Naralex? Like, we just didn't play a 7-5 on this turn, which I know that turn 4, like, you want to play the 10 Trasher going into turn 5 with the way this is shaking out, because very likely that's the turn they want to play Skull. But I don't know, this is so much less stats on the board.
I think it's not so much about the timing of the 10 Trasher, whereas he just wants to get the conditionings on them, because Glory kept those 2 conditionings, right? And then he just wouldn't have very many minions to play them on if the 10 Trasher came down. Not saying it's the best way to approach the matchup, but this was the game plan he went for from the mulligan. Buffing Naralex with conditioning is not relevant whatsoever, so Glory is sticking with the game plan.
Dream again, this Fell Screamer is just going to be screaming back and forth for eternity.
And the Morgs are gonna cost -8 or something.
Yeah, I mean,
including the Skull discounts. That's how that works, right?
Yeah, I don't think that will end up being relevant, but you know, maybe in some instance it could come into play. Posesi missing all the combo pieces. I suppose Fell Screamer technically a combo piece, but not all too impactful to discount. And so just Chaos Strike to kill off the...
Impatient.
You'd have to imagine Bumper Car, but at the same time, maybe killing the Parade Leader because you're expecting conditioning next turn, and you don't want to give them the 1/1s.
It might even be a full pass if Posesi is hoping to sweep up this entire board, because you kind of don't want to waste the Chaos Strike and the healing on a minion with low health, right? Because with 1 spell damage or 1 Morg, the Immolation Aura could already clear up this entire board. But crucially, Posesi is lacking any of those cards, so it is a bit of a risk, but he's just going to see what the board state looks like for next turn.
That's a spicy minion, though. Conditioning Coin Rakara, of course, available here.
Can get his minions to maximum 5 health on board, which is still within range of Talented Arcanist Immolation Aura, but you do have to toe that line of how much is enough pressure to make them blink, and I do think it's a reasonable usage of resources, because even if Posesi has the clear, Glory would then have like 10 Trasher to follow up.
I agree. I think, as you said, Arcanist into Immolation Aura is the scary play here. But if they have that and you just pass it, or you just play 10 Trasher or whatever, you're kind of losing the game anyway, right? Like, are you realistically coming back from that?
I'm super confused about the game plan now from Glory, because I thought he held on to the 10 Trasher in order to get the full conditioning value. But he might just be saying, this board already demands the Talented Arcanist and Immolation Aura. If it's not there, he's just winning. Kind of what's happening. Posesi's going fishing with the draw, doesn't hit any spell damage.
Yeah, the way I see it here is that Glory is looking to get double conditioning on the 1/1s, because as 5/5s, they're kind of at the point where they're a little bit too tricky to be dealt with through the small removal pieces. You know, you do need then Arcanist Immolation or a Moarg I-Beam, things like that, to be able to effectively chew through it.
And fair enough, this board is warranting a lot of removal from Posesi. It comes out pretty clean because of this Throwglaive at the end, and Posesi will be able to heal up for 4. But
okay. Yeah, he goes with the Throwglaive there at the end. I was wondering if you just leave the bumper car up, because your opponent's hand, you definitely can't have a full read on them having double conditioning, but they've been making weird plays this game, you know, and so denying them the buff on the 1/1s was tempting, but overall, just saving health, probably more important. Still gets the skull next turn, and it's just continuing to look like a good game for Posesi.
Here for a good time.
good refill as any for Glory, though. I think you correctly identified that he was saving the conditionings for this next wave of threats. It's of that health breakpoint where it does require some spell damage to go alongside either Fell Scream Blast or Immolation Aura, but he's not pushing lethal this turn. He has saved the coin and could be threatening Alex from any turn 8 or onward, but Posesi has this one window. Ooh.
That's it. That's it. Being able to copy 0 mana Moarg. I think
that's
we can...
a gazillion damage next turn. Absolutely.
Quite right. Copy it on this turn, spend your mana. You can overdraw if you want. It does not matter. You have lethal in hand next turn. I don't think there's any way that the warrior can get out of range. Even if they have Kresh, they can't get enough armor, even if they could activate it with the Frenzy to get out of range. So I do just still think Posesi's got him cornered here.
There's just +3 spell damage and then double. Tons of damage. It's like 48 off of 1 Fell Scream Blast, I think.
I count the same. And so lethal opportunities with the ETC, obviously not available, so he just tries to make the biggest, most threatening board he possibly can, force an awkward turn from his opponent. Maybe he doesn't have the OTK lethal after Double Skull. We can clearly see that Posesi moving up 2 games to 0 against Glory, and despite a very well-fought series in the last series against Alan, Glory is looking in big trouble now. It's only the Rush Warrior left for Posesi that needs to get a win. And given that he has the chance of playing against the Rogue, which is a great matchup, the Demon Hunter, which is, despite what we see here, not a terrible matchup, and the Mirror, I think Posesi is looking to be a prime candidate to be our first player through to the semifinals.
Completely unflappable is Posesi as ever. And to be honest, we can parallel these 2 games of the OTK Demon Hunter that just occurred, right? Where they both had very early skull into very amazing discounts and were faced down with a lot of pressure. But the difference was Posesi managed to get through this one turn where he had that threatening board to clear without using too many combo pieces. Obviously, there was less to think about because he didn't have immediate lethal to have to contend with, but you can see that when Demon Hunter fails, it often happens in these turns where the player just looks like they crumble because they lack the time to figure out what combo pieces they can actually throw away. Posesi having Immolation Aura, I-Beam, and Throwglaive for a clean clear was the difference compared to Glory having only combo pieces to clear back against the Rogue turn. But still, I think Posesi has definitely shown a cooler head throughout these series where he has to play OTK Demon Hunter and play against it when he faces his practice partners.
Yep, I think Posesi has just been... you know, things have been turning around. We've seen from Posesi historically that he has struggled from roping out. He's made some blunders, which do still occur occasionally from Posesi. They're usually the weirdest misplays you can ever see that don't really make any sense, and you kind of struggle how a player who consistently plays so well makes such obvious mistakes, but you know, those are very, very rare plays nowadays. You don't often see them from Posesi anymore, as entertaining as they can be when they do happen. But for now, for Posesi, again, the mirror lineup against the Rush Warrior. Glory going to be lining up once again. And if we think back to what we've seen over previous weeks, I think it was Surrender against Give Please was the match that stuck out the most, where going for the greedy Rush Warrior plan in the mirror has worked very well. You build up all your resources, get a big Samuro, and then sweep your opponent's board, overload them with value thanks to your massive conditionings. Do you think that is still the correct line of play, given that Kresh and also, I suppose, Naralex are in there? Or do you think the aggressive game plan will have taken over now?
I think it really depends on what kind of opening hand you get, because if you are given the blessing of double conditioning, then you do have the right to go for that greedy line, especially if you hit the Samuro, which can reset basically any board state. I think the Warrior ideally does like to go for that greed game plan, because we've kind of seen that the aggression, if it doesn't hit a very specific health break point, can just fall short to the point where the Troublemaker isn't enough to get over the line, and that problem is only compounded now by Kresh. But if one player doesn't hit any conditionings, they can be forced to just going for the curve, because they already realize without that value that they cannot win in the late game.
I mean, there you have it. Glory had close to the perfect curve hand with Parade Leader, a Rush minion, a Stage Dive to draw another Rush minion to try and keep the stats rolling. Throws it all away. Only keeps the Ganag as a card you always keep in the matchup to just solo the early game. And he's looking for conditioning, and he's looking for Watley. Both players want that value. Blademaster Samuro is not a bad card to have found at all either. But both players at the moment, low card draw, low value hands overall. So it's going to be a scrappy mid game, I think.
And it's already a tough decision for posesi, where he can get down the Parade Leader here because the Ganarg doesn't wake up just yet for Glory, and sometimes that pushes additional damage, but posesi doesn't even have a Crab Rider or Bumper card to follow it up, both of which would have been huge to potentially, if they stick, cheapen the Tent Trasher by 2 by the time the Ganarg wakes up, and then have it playable on curve, but just not happening here. posesi's still just going to play the Parade Leader to get some minion presence, hoping that his next top deck will give him some value off of that. Okay.
Not bad at all. Yeah, allows him to keep his hand nice and filled up. Very possibly still going to be able to go for Tent Trasher next turn, given that there are 2 different minion types on the board, and you're looking at going for only killing one of them as Glory. So a good top deck overall for posesi. His tempo game plan is looking kind of strong.
It was a risk to play the Parade Leader, but he kind of realized if he doesn't have conditioning, this hand is not getting there, even if he gets the Playmaker to go with Parade Leader and a bunch of Dark Moon Riders. A Bumper car coming down early and sticking, like you said, means the Tent Trasher is very playable here, and that's going to threaten Glory quite a bit, even if it's dead to a weapon swing. Actually, probably doesn't put any damage on it and swings into the Ganarg himself.
Oh yeah, you're keeping this board as healthy as possible. And now Glory, his own game plan is starting to look a little bit shaky, because he of course has the conditioning into Samuro, but it's a couple turns away still, given that the earliest he could go for a fully rank 2 buff Samuro would be, I guess, next turn with coin conditioning Samuro. But he feels it's worth it to use the coin here just to play the Tent Trasher down, which I can fully agree with, because he's tanking a lot of damage before then.
Definitely feels like Glory lost in this early game exchange in order to, because posesi played the Tent Trasher as a threat, and Glory had to use that rush just to deal with it his entire turn, and posesi gets to follow up. But again, it's because of the interplay of whether or not you draw conditioning that Glory feels comfortable using resources like this, just so he doesn't take too much damage in the early game. He knows he can swing back with the Samuro turn. Conditioning this turn and then Parade Leader with Samuro next turn can deal with pretty much any board. But in the meantime, he'll have to tank another 7 damage, which is quite scary.
Man, it's going to be such a close one. He's got the conditioning Samuro, double conditioning Samuro if he wants to, which can clear essentially any board that posesi can develop in the next few turns. But with Rakara, Parade Leader, these Dark Moon Riders, maybe the damage is enough for Troublemaker to just close out the game come turn 8. So how does Glory ride that very fine line between being too greedy and not being greedy enough with this hand?
Has to survive until the Alexstrasza. And if we're talking about too greedy, it's just obviously he can't Samuro this turn, and so none of the minions are good this turn either. It's just whether or not he plays both conditioning or one conditioning and hero power. And I'm inclined to say that it's still double conditioning, because next turn he can just go Samuro and hero power if he needs to fit it in. And then if there is like not attack, super high health on board for Possess, he can deviate to Parade Leader and Samuro instead. But Glory is going for one hero power, weave it in to try and get out of range later on of Troublemaker. I guess just going about it in the other order, where if Possessy does develop anything super high health, then he can rip the second conditioning. And to be fair to Glory, he has seen like double Tent Trasher, right? So there's not that many things Possessy can develop to get out of range, but Rakara is one of those threats.
That's right, and how you attack with this Rakara is really interesting, I think, because Samuro is what you're primarily afraid of, and so therefore, my instinct is to say that Parade Leader Dark Moon Rakara allows you to sacrifice in the 1-1 into the 2-2, and you just get to swing your weapon face, because if the 1-1 is going to die to Samuro anyway, you want to get that damage face. You want to make sure that Troublemaker alone can close out the game.
Possessy instead going for Crab Rider over the Dark Moon Riders, which I think the other important aspect of this aggressive push from Possessy we're not accounting for is ETC, which is another way for Possessy to get over the line, right? Because he knows he's not beating a conditioning Samuro hand on board. He's relying on Troublemaker to get some damage through, and then maybe ETC to close out over the top, so holding on to more rushes is effective here. Glory in the end, because the Tent Trasher got too big, still ripped the second conditioning, so between the hero power line at this turn or next turn, it kind of worked out the same as what I suggested, except Glory doesn't manage to fit in a Parade Leader, but he probably values hero power more than that anyway.
Oh, Runthak as well is not what you wanted to see. Unable to be played on this turn. Like, are you looking at double Dark Moon Rider just to be able to kill off the Samuro? And then, of course, you know that any board developed thereafter is going to be essentially impossible for you to kill.
Yeah. This also makes ETC top decks a lot worse, but Possessy simply cannot afford to leave up the Samuro because he's trying to clear the runway for Troublemaker to go face next turn, and he also can't really use his weapon swing because he's also earmarked that for face. He's not beating, again, the conditioning hand on value. It's all about the aggression.
Parade Leader Boulder Fist Ogre is an absolutely disgusting stat line to have on a 2-drop. And even though Runthak is kind of tempting on this turn, honestly, just going Playmaker double Parade Leader was kind of where my head was at, just to get max stats on the board.
I don't think he could afford to take any more damage, though, even if it's just 2. With this amount of stats, as long as he's not dead this turn, and then to Alex, or he stays above 8 HP for the next turn, then he can swing pretty much any board with any rush minion top deck. This is an ugly Troublemaker board, but conditioning Runthak does allow Possessy to clear the other Runthak, but then Glory just plays more minions, and then the Troublemaker gets even worse, so Possessy's gonna bite the bullet here.
Yeah.
Worst possible combination.
Yeah, I mean, even if both had gone face there, I don't think realistically you are looking at an Alexstrasza top deck, because Glory is just going to hero power every single turn from here on in, just to make sure that that is not even a possibility.
And if you had killed off the 3-1, maybe you force Glory to spend mana on clearing the board, which allows you time to go for something like Sword Eater into Alexstrasza, but all of those outs quickly evaporating now because Glory is setting up the counter-lethal. Knows he doesn't have to hero power here because he's at 9, and worst case scenario, he can Alex his own face as well.
Yeah, I think even if you get exactly this of weapon face into Alexstrasza as the next card, you still don't have the out, because as you said, Alexstrasza just heals you back up out of range of even that. I'm thinking Possessy is close to out of outs. He just can't win back this board.
And again, we've talked about the interplay of the conditioning hands in Rush Warrior. We've seen the aggressive line get there here and there, but it's that really crucial turn 6, turn 7 for the aggressive Warrior where they're trying to bridge the gap into Playmaker, where the Rush Warrior that has played conditioning can really power spike, right? They get the immediate value off of their slow turn 5. And then if Possessy did not have an immediate way to get more damage, then he's just simply not able to close out the game and make it to the finish line exactly as it panned out here.
And I do want to say, as a credit to posesi, the way he positioned his Rakara turn was very good against one conditioning plus Samuro, which is what he was playing around, because he had a 4 health Rakara that was left undamaged, and so the weapon swing would have had to come into it, 4 more damage in order to clear the board, which would have meant that maybe he could have then got lethal with the the Troublemaker or the Alexstrasza afterwards. But the double conditioning for Glory, just too much. Alexstrasza face, I think, is going to be the final chance for posesi to take things, as Glory will get a win on the board.
Yeah, you're very right to point out those breakpoints, especially like aside from second conditioning, it could also be Parade Leader with Samuro, but again, it's so hard to play around triple card combinations from the Rush Warrior. So as far as the average hand, I think posesi did his best to play around it, but Glory also noted very well that he did not need to play around Alex towards the end game there. Alex's own face to remove any outs. As this Rush Warrior has become so popular and often played by particularly the Japanese practice group, you can already see that they've got the matchup down to a T. And I think we can quite clearly conclude that if you have Samuro conditioning, there's very few hands that the aggressive Rush Warrior can really manage to take the matchup with because of that super lackluster turn 6, turn 7.
Yeah, I think if we remove Gnarg from Glory's hand, then maybe we can start talking. But that combo of early game being solved essentially purely by Gnarg being such an absurdly powerful play on turn 1, and then, as you correctly said, the conditioning Samuro, too much for a non-conditioning hand to keep up with. So the Warrior takes the win for Glory. Arguably, however, that was the best matchup left over to him, as he now has Demon Hunter, which, again, is a close one. I think, personally, I would still say that Demon Hunter is in the lead in that matchup, although it gets a little bit close. But the Rogue for Glory is where things, I think, are going to get really, really tough. It was bad before the Wailing Caverns came in, but now with Kresh, Lord of Turtling, available to the Rush Warrior, I just think it's going to be a nightmare for Rogue to try and get the win.
Oh, that's a huge inclusion as well. Because I think Rogue traditionally, when they have won that matchup against Rush Warrior, it's by going very aggressive in the early game, knowing that similar to like those aggressive Rush Warriors that posesi had. I mean, I say aggressive meaning to say that they don't have access to conditioning, and so they can't really win on board. That's kind of Rogue's position as well. They kind of just want to vomit their hand in the early game, knowing that they can't take any value trades, and hope that that early damage essentially leads them to a double wicked stab / Alexstrasza out towards the end of the game. But with the Crush in there, like you said, for that 8 armor gain and persistent board presence that can take those good trades, I think it does get even better for the Warrior.
Does feel that way. So it's going to be an uphill struggle still for Glory. For either of our players, though, if they do take the win, they will, of course, be going down to the decider match. They still have an extra chance, given how well they've done so far. They will be playing against the winner of either Allen or Surrender. So it's not like they're going to have an easy path to victory if they do get the loss, but they, of course, still have that chance. The winner, though, will be ecstatic going all the way through to the semi-finals on Sunday. So to get things started now for Glory and posesi on the Warrior. Still expecting, I would imagine, the same game plan we've seen time and again for Glory on the OTK Demon Hunter, primarily focusing on your own win condition, because these early aggressive pushes from Rush Warrior have proven to be very easy for OTK Demon Hunter to remove or often just ignore.
Very interesting opening hand for posesi, because of course we know Gnarg is kept, but Athletic Study Stage Dive often feel like good ways to make sure your resource game is on point, but then keeping them together also feels like a bit redundant, because you do have that turn 1 marked for the Gnarg itself. So posesi was just looking for, you'd have to imagine, just better curve options with Parade Leader. Hits Bumper Car, which is a decent way to keep the curve going, but this is not the high pressure type of like early 10 trasher hand that you really want to have on coin versus Demon Hunter.
Well, clearly for Glory, you're still considering the turbo draw into Skull and then dump all your cards to make room for the Outcast positioning, but already this is not the kind of hand that you want to just liberally get rid of purely for the sake of moving the Skull to the Outcast position.
Yeah, these are very premium removal tools. And you speak of the skull, and it shall appear, I suppose, because the double Fell Scream Blast, not only are they premium removal tools, they're the best way to activate the combo. Like, you can get it done with I-Beam, but it's usually a lot harder to assemble. And then the Immolation Aura is very important to deal with, like, that mid-game one conditioning type of board that you expect to see from Rush Warrior. Glory just going to remove using the Ethereal Aug Merchant, valuing this Chaos Strike, probably to remove the Gunarg on the next turn.
Yeah. Oh man, I think you still have to outcast the Skull. I think it's probably still your best chance of getting the win. Like, again, the difference between reducing Moarg or Il'gynoth and getting the lethal on turn 7, for example, or turn 8, is so different to getting it on turn 9, 10, or 11. Like, the extra turns that you give Warrior to play extra Troublemakers, Alexstrasza, buffed up minions, it makes all the difference in the world. And I do kind of feel like that's still the best chance for Glory to get the Skull played and the game won.
But if he gets the Skull from the left, that means playing the Fell Scream Blast first, which means that you can only combo with I-Beam, which means that if you don't discount any of those best minions, then it's very hard to actually get to the right breakpoints. So it's already a huge dilemma. And on top of that, Posesi drew Watley, which he can play next turn into double conditioning. So these removal tools, Glory doesn't know it, but they're going to be essential if he doesn't hit the combo naturally. And again, not really possible to do with Skull that early on.
Yeah, Posesi has hit the uber high value hand, and it looks like Glory is coming to the decision that he needs to either try and outcast Skull from the right hand side, or just play it unoutcasted. I mean, I guess he still has the possibility to just go Immolation or a double Fell Scream Blast next turn, but using the I-Beam here means that his actual lifesteal spells to do the combo with are starting to become extremely limited.
Yeah. Not looking good for our world champion, but meanwhile for Posesi, everything is coming together. He's even going to get double conditioning on Kresh. I don't think that's super relevant in this position where he can just win off of like minion presence, but there are certain worlds where that breakpoint of an additional 8 health can be a pain for Demon Hunter to deal with, especially with combo pieces used. And like, Kresh just cannot be taken down in one fell swoop if it goes up to 13 HP.
Oh, it's relevant just in terms of asserting dominance over your opponent, slamming a big old turtle on the board and saying, deal with this, you idiot. Spoiler, they can't.
Interesting draw for Glory though, because that fills out his mana, and with the Raging Fell Screamer mana banked for the first Moarg, there is a world where he can get the combo done around turn 8 with the non-outcast Skull. I don't necessarily think he's going to live that long, but it also feels like he needs to use Fell Scream Blast for board clear in the coming turns.
Yeah, there was definitely potential for it. Again, the right-hand Skull positioning, it very rarely comes up, but it is actually possible now, given that he could go Eldrazi, Arcanist, Fell Scream Blast, and then if you get a 1-mana spell, you can do it. But there's honestly very few 1-mana spells that you can actually play that don't add an extra card to your hand anyway.
It's also awkward. What if the Skull hits Il'gynoth immediately and Moarg, which will then cost 0? There's just not enough damage there to get a full combo done as well. And so Glory, I think, does have to clear the board, at least partially.
Yeah.
But using any of these spells leaves him in such a bad position for any minions coming up. So I think he's just trapped between a rock and a hard place. No way out to actually leave him with enough combo pieces to deal lethal.
I mean, you could still go Arcanist, Immolation, sorry, Arcanist, double Fell Scream Blast, Immolation, and then just play the Skull next turn. Like,
Okay.
Again, you have limited routes to get the victory here. This is not a play that you want to make by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if you went for the board clear here and then didn't place exactly Skull as the next card, you just lose because they play one big board, they play another big board. Everything you do from there on is too slow. And so with this line, it's slim, but it gives them the chance of, as you said, getting Il'gynoth, second Skull, Moarg, extra ways to finally get his own combo online, because he needs to do it so fast with the amount of pressure that Posesi is putting online.
when you put it that way, I do think it is as good a game plan as any that Glory's got. So in terms of being able to deal damage with Il'gynoth, naturally in the deck there's just one I-Beam left. He can still discover more I-Beams off of Illidari Studies, but if we're talking singular I-Beam breakpoints, we need like second Arcanist and then 3 Moargs for 40 damage. Something out there like that. Glory has bought himself time, and 1 Moarg enters the hand. That's Studies to potentially get another I-Beam and a super cheap Skull, which means that none of these cards are getting played, right? Because he just wants to have this Skull be outcast as likely as possible.
Agreed.
The Illidari would put another card to the right of Skull, and the Philosophy would put a Moarg to the right of Skull. So while floating this mana does feel a little bit inefficient, you recoup it with the Skull discounts a lot of the time, if Glory is just not dead.
The crash is a 7-13 as well. It is just hilarious. Allows him to put the max pressure on board because the Dark Moon Rider is very impactful in its own right as a 5/5. Threatening lethal next turn, even without the use of a Troublemaker quite happily here. So Glory needs to find something more impressive. Acrobatics off the top, though, is not what he wanted to see. Do you start with Studies now?
Yeah, try to hit Skull that way, I guess. I-Beam, he needed that. And then I think now it's Unoutcast Skull. Oh wait, he can do it from the left.
Wow, okay. That's pretty cool.
Uh-huh. I don't know what the outs are because I'm not sure how he clears this board. I guess it's like a second Immolation Aura.
Okay, he's going for I-Beam now because he might not be able to outcast it afterwards. Sure.
Yeah.
Poor Warlock.
Even if he's surviving, I don't think there are any breakpoints he can do at this point, having used 2 Moargs.
Yeah.
And the Crush gaining Posesi another 8 armor.
No, I agree. I think it's just been one too many combo pieces used. He can only get one more Skull, one more Moarg, or I guess potentially 2 more if he gets the Philosophy off of the Illidari Studies exactly.
Imagine even frenzying your Crush. Posesi's like, nah, let me push this 7. And you know what? Absolutely. All avenues to victory have been secured. I think that means that we are sending Posesi through to Sunday.
It's going to need to be a miracle for Glory. He does not find it. Still in with a chance, but the man of the hour. He won week 5. He won week 7. He finished first after the end of the initial season here, coming in as the top seed into playoffs. Sails through with a victory there over our current world champion. Posesi is looking like, if nothing else, any doubts as to whether or not he could keep up 100% with the other Japanese players have been thoroughly quelled at this point. Going through to the semi-finals, Posesi is the man of the hour and looking unstoppable, unflappable as well at this point, as he is a prime contender to be our representative at the World Championships.
Well deserved from Posesi. Honestly, having taken down Glory and then, Alutamu just last week as well, every time I see one of the 3 Japanese players face up against